On to a story now that might just renew your faith that solutions to big problems don't have to be political or based on greed. That some actions being taken right now are rooted in basic logic and even more so in kindness. I'm talking about the Rolling Jubilee, a new program launched by members of Occupy Wall Street. They've been raising money to purchase distressed consumer debt from financial firms at an extremely reduced price. Once they own someone else's debt, they forgive it. Let me show you how it works. Normally, when people need money to pay for education, to buy a house, or for medical bills, they go to a bank to take out a loan. They have to pay back this debt over time, and investors purchase the debt to make money on the interest the borrower pays each month. But when a borrower is unable to make that monthly payment, the value of the debt goes down. Investors often sell it to debt collectors for pennies on the dollar. Debt collectors make a living by hounding borrowers for the money. They make a profit by getting people to pay back every dollar. Well, that's where the Rolling Jubilee comes in. The strike debt movement wants to purchase this debt for pennies on the dollar. However, instead of trying to squeeze the money out of those borrowers, they would buy the debt for the purpose of forgiving it, essentially making that debt disappear. Joining me now from our studios in New York to break this down, RT correspondent Anastasia Churkina, and here in our own studios in D.C., Lauren Lister, host of Capital Account on RT. Anastasia, let me start with you and just have you give us a few more details about how this all works.
Well, Christy, while some Occupy Wall Street haters might have been assuming that the movement has started really laying low and not doing much, in the last several months they have been working on this project that's been dubbed People's Bailout by the People, the Rolling Jubilee, and basically experts are saying that this is one of the best ideas possibly the Occupy Wall Street movement has ever had. This strike debt project, what it entails, like you explained, is basically buying distressed debt for pennies on the dollar, and instead of hounding the burdened enough debt owners to get the money out of them, what Occupy Wall Street is going to do is it's merely going to abolish it, so just completely wipe it out. So instead of having debt buyers hounding these people, Occupy hopes to help these people out and make sure they don't have to deal with this anymore. We spoke with former Wall Street employee and now Occupy Wall Street activist Alexis Goldstein. She broke it down for us. Take a listen.
Normally, like if you default on a loan, there's all these collections agencies that can buy your debt, and then they harass you, and if like 3% of the people they get the money from, they do okay because they buy the debt for pennies on the dollar. So what we're doing is we're trying to buy $1 million worth of debt, which only costs $50,000 because it's pennies on the dollar, and abolish it. And so people will get a phone call saying, instead of getting a phone call from a collections agency, they'll get one phone call saying, hey, Occupy Wall Street bought your debt, it's been abolished. And if you feel like helping, give us $5 to help somebody else.
Sounds like a phone call I'm sure many people would be very happy to receive. Now, Strike Debt estimates that as little as $50,000 could abolish $1 million worth of debt, and it's really small donations that they're looking for. They're saying $25 could erase $500, $100 could erase $2,000, and already the clock has been ticking. They have a clock on their website, and last time I checked a couple of minutes ago, they've already collected in donations more than $91,000, and they're hoping this could abolish as much as over $1.8 million. And of course, the biggest event of the week is the fundraiser that takes place in New York City this Thursday, where it's a variety show, it's an online telethon, and they're hoping to really gather the big money on Thursday.
All right, let me go to Lauren now. Lauren, we hear so much in Washington about bailing out banks and about debt forgiveness and what to do about it. What do you think about this as a solution?
This I love. What I love about this is so often we hear about problems like debt, problems like student loans and over-indebtedness in terms of what is the government going to do to solve this? Why is the government bailing out banks when not people? Well, there are a number of reasons to explain why that's happening, having to do with just the way things are structured, corporate interests, all those sorts of things. So what I love about this is it's not asking what can the government do to help. It is a private sector solution. Alexis Goldstein's a former Wall Street employee. She knows how the big banks work. She's probably going, let's play within their own game. You know, distressed debt is offered at pennies on the dollar. Let's buy it and abolish it. Debt forgiveness is one of these issues that constantly comes up, okay? Over indebtedness is terrible for the economy, okay? When the private sector is so indebted, they're deleveraging. They're not spending, they're just drowning, you know? So there's this whole argument about debt forgiveness that goes on. We talk about it on our show all of the time with economists like Steve Keen, and people call for debt jubilees, but you don't see governments doing that. And in fact, bankruptcy laws have been made tougher over the years in the United States, because bankruptcy, you could argue, is debt forgiveness. You know, that's how people go about absolving themselves of their debts, at a great consequence, obviously, because bankruptcy is horrible for your credit, but it is the way to do it. But that's been made tougher and tougher and tougher. So here is a debt jubilee scenario. It's brought on by the public sector. They are beating Wall Street at their own game if this works out, and I love it.
Absolutely. And you know, we were doing research about this program, and we took a look at the website, the Rolling Jubilee website, and they have on there some pretty staggering statistics. More than 77% of American households are actually in debt. More than half of bankruptcies, about 62%, are caused by medical illness. And tuition debt, these student loans, skyrocketing student loans, reached more than $1 trillion. Real briefly, Anastasia, I know for the last few years you've been doing a number of stories, really giving a face to what this means. What's it going to take, in your opinion, for a systematic overhaul?
Well, Chrissy, I think it's definitely going to take a lot, but this is really a wonderful, wonderful step, where, as Lauren mentioned, people don't have to rely on the government, on the corporations to do something for them and to hopefully leave them alone and bail them out. This is something that the people are doing themselves, and the numbers are insane. Like you mentioned, on average, 1 in 7 Americans is getting hounded by debt collectors on a daily basis, and this is something that's a huge issue that's burdening so many people. And curiously, with this project, some experts are saying this is a wonderful idea, and it's definitely going to help out some people, because of course the numbers are so huge that collecting enough money to erase, you know, say student debt, for example, like you mentioned, over $1 trillion is going to take a very, very long time. And some of them are saying, even though a very small percentage of people will most likely be helped by this project, it's a wonderful step forward. It's a wonderful beginning. It's a, you know, uproot movement where people are taking matters into their own hands, and this is what Occupy has been about since the very beginning. So are they going to be able to change the system overnight? Probably not, of course, but it's a good beginning.
And Lauren, I want to go back to something you said. You said this is an example of everyday people sort of beating Wall Street at their own game. And what are the chances, though, that Wall Street is not going to be happy about this? Some of these big banks are going to say, wait a minute, we don't want these people to have their loans forgiven. We want them to learn a lesson.
Right, because there's a vested interest for people to collect the money, and, you know, perhaps there wouldn't be customers for this distressed debt if they weren't going to be able to recoup that. So there's a lot of incentives involved on behalf of the banks and the debt collectors and that sort of thing. And in fact, looking back to a similar type of program that was being done or attempted to be done with home mortgages and allowing short sales, then to have those homeowners stay in their homes, and they were trying to do the same thing by buying distressed mortgage debt and then restructuring for the borrower. Evidently, reportedly, Felix Salmon, who writes for Reuters, talked about one of these, the American Homeowner Preservation, which was one of these types of programs, and he said that the banks didn't want to play ball, that the banks were opposed to this, they didn't want to do this. Ironically, the reason cited was moral hazard, which I think that there's, I just don't think that anybody on a Wall Street bank can say that with a straight face when they're talking about anyone anymore, because there's so much moral hazard still enabled on Wall Street in terms of bailouts. But so it does look like there is some evidence of similar things where there has been resistance to Wall Street. However, what kind of political capital does Wall Street really have right now?
Well, and that's what some of the supporters of this are saying. They're saying, you know what, this is perfect because it makes Wall Street and some of the people, the executives at some of these big banks, not be able to say, you know, I'm going to put a stop to this, because they're going to just look even more greedy and you know, dampen the already very dampened reputation that they have. So in that way, it could be an even better solution. Just real briefly, Anastasia, while I still have you, Occupy Wall Street, a lot of people thought it was dead. We saw them organized in an extraordinary way just in the last few weeks to really help victims of Hurricane Sandy, and now this. What does this mean overall on a broad level?
Well, Chrissy, what this means is that the people who were hoping that when the masses left the streets of the United States, that would be the end of the fight. And what we have seen happen is that not being the case. We've known there's been tremendous effort when it comes to the post-Hurricane Sandy relief that Occupy has carried out. There have had several other programs that they've worked on to try to put regulation. This is just really another way of showing that the group is very much around. And even though they can't be on the streets chanting the slogans that we all know very well at this point, they're doing these really more productive things now with their time in terms of helping out specific people that need
putting those slogans into action. RT correspondent Anastasia Churkina, also Lauren Lister, host of Capital Account.